We're starting with the arms. This is round 30. You're going to start with 17 single crochet. Then it's going to say TW. That means turn your work. So you're going to flip your work over so that you can crochet in the opposite direction that you came. Your first stitch is going to always be in the last stitch you made. So we're going to do 12 single crochet. $11 and $12. Then we're going to turn our work again so that you crochet in the opposite direction. Now we're going in the right way, and we're going to keep going in this way. So we're going to do 12 more single crochet. Three, 4, 11 and 12. Sometimes your last stitch on the edge can be a little tough. Oopsie daisies. Now you have 3 stitches left. So when you add your next stitch, when you have a little ledge like this, never put a stitch like in it. You always want to go to the next stitch over. So if you look, the stitch we just made is coming from this spot. So our next spot is here. So we're going to do 3 single crochet front loops. So only go into the front loop of your stitch. Front loop only, not the back loop. 1. I'm going to do 3 of those here. Now we're on to round 31. We're going to do 5 more front loop stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're done with the front loops. We're going to do just both loops from now on. So your next stitch is right there. Going to do 2 single crochet and then 4 decreases. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're going to do 5 regular single crochets. 3, 4, and 5. So now you have your little elbow done. So now I'll meet you at the end and I'll show you how to close your arm at the top. Now we're on round 38. So we're going to shut it. We're not stuffing the arm at all. These guys don't have stuffed arms. I find it lays flatter if you don't stuff them. So you're going to start with 2 single crochet. You put the stitch marker back if you want. I will, just for this video. You don't really need it anymore. So after you make your 2 stitches, you're going to fold it, but you're going to fold it so that when you crochet it together, it's going to be through your next stitch and the one you just made. You want to fold it in half that way. So now find your next stitch, and this can be a little wonky. You just want to go back into the last one you made, too. Just fight with it a little bit, it'll go there. Pull your yarn through both, and then finish for your first single crochet. And that's the hardest one. Now I'm going to take this out. So that was 1, and we're supposed to do 8 across, so 7 more. Just find your next stitch, and then the next one on the other side. Pull your yarn through both of them, finish your stitch. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you started with 16 stitches, so it should line up perfectly. 8. Then you're going to chain 1, cut just a little tail, and there's your arm done. Now we're on to the tail, so you're going to need your knitting needles. I'm not going to show a tutorial on how to knit, but I'll tell you what to search for all the parts I'm doing, because there's tons of really good tutorials out there. So you're going to start with a really long tail. I'm doing a long tail cast on, so if you're uncertain about this part, search up long tail cast on. It starts with slip knot. That's my first stitch of my 18 that I'm casting on. How I do my long tail is I grab the tail side with my thumb, my working yarn under my forefinger, and you go under the thumb, over the other side, and just pull on it. Oops. Under the thumb, over, pull. Under, over, pull. So I'm doing 18 of those. I got 5. So we should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So that's our first row. Now we're going to purl 18. So if you're unsure what that is, search up how to purl or how to knit and purl, because we'll be doing knitting next. That's 1. Alright, so that's our second row done. We cast it on, we purled our second row, and now we're going to knit a row. Still just 18 stitches. Next, we're going to purl again for round 4. So now for the next 4 rows, we're going to knit and purl twice. So knit a row, purl a row, knit 1, purl 1, and then I'll meet you after that to show you how to change colors. We're going to do a color change. In the pattern, we should be at the spot where you see a CC. So if you're doing stripes, color change when you see that CC. If you're not doing stripes, just ignore it. So to color change, you're going to insert your needle like you're going to knit normally, but instead of grabbing this yarn, you're going to grab your new yarn. So here's your tail. That's on that side. And I just kind of pinch it with my fingers and pull that through. And then I just tighten it a little bit. And we color changed. So now you can knit normally with our new color. You can also get that color out of here. And what I like to do is take my 2 little strings. You can do this at any point, or you don't even really have to, but I like to. And I make just a little knot so that they'll never undo on me. And I don't gotta worry about it anymore. And you can just let those strings be, because when we sew it, like the 2 long sides together, they'll be on the inside, so you don't have to worry about them. So finish your row. I'm using a different kind of yarn because I wanted this light pastel yellow color, so we'll see what it looks like when it's done. It's a little bit of an experiment. Now you're going to purl, still just 18. We're going to change that next round. I'm going to go down to 17. I'm using these giant needles. Sorry if they're tapping. Alright, so now I purled 18. Some went a little wonky there. I'll have to fix it when I get to it. I'm not the greatest knitter in the world, but I know how to do simple stuff. So now we're going to do our first decrease. Now we see knit 2 together for the first time. So all that is instead of putting your knitting needle through one loop, we're putting it through 2. So we're knitting 2 together. And then you just knit normally. And instead of 1, you grab 2. Just like that. And that is all you need to know to finish the tail. It's just purl, knitting, and knit 2 together. When your tail is done, you should have a big long piece. Mine looks a bit bubbly because I used 2 different kinds of yarn. But I think it's going to turn out cute when I sew it. But I'm going to show you how to cast off because that's what we're doing at the end now. So, cast off, first you need to make 2, knit 2, just normally. Once you knit 2, you're going to grab the first loop that you knit, and you're just going to pull it over like that. So now you cast it off 1, and you have only 1 loop on your hook. You're going to knit 1 more, so you have 2. And then you're going to grab that first one and just pull it over like that. We have 1 more and pull it over. And now we cast it off all of our stitches. Now you want to cut a really long piece. I usually cut mine the length of my tail plus another half, if not 2 lengths. I always cut more yarn than I need because I hate it when you don't have enough. So once you cut it, you're just gonna pull it through. And now we're gonna get ready to sew this guy together. So once you're done casting off, we're now going to sew it together. So you want the knit side facing outwards. We're not going to be flipping it inside out. So the side you want showing, you want to make sure you have on the outside of your project. So I usually just take all the loose ends and kind of just tuck them in so they're out of my way. And what you want to do is get a bunch of stitch markers. I only have 2 because I keep losing them and I need to buy more. But I recommend going down your project and just pinning it all the way down before you start sewing so that it doesn't get wonky and lopsided by the time you get to the end. It's easier if you have stripes because it's easier to visually see where the sides match up, but if you don't have stripes, I really recommend doing that. So starting on the tip here, you're gonna find the loop that's at the end, and you're just gonna pull your yarn through like that so that you're on the right side of your project to start your mattress stitch. So to do your vertical mattress stitch, lots of really good videos out there. If you don't know what that is, you're gonna find sort of the last like knitting line of your project. So find the last V, and then you're just gonna grab, it's gonna be a little bar that's between the edge of your knitting and your first knitting row. And those bars are what you're gonna be sewing together. That's one side, and then you're gonna find the same bar on the other side. This yarn's gonna be a little bit of a struggle, I can tell. That's okay. So that was one on each side, and you're just gonna keep going down that way. Again, this is called a vertical mattress stitch. If you want a better tutorial for that. Yeah, you're just gonna go along your whole project, stitching it up. I recommend doing this on the couch. I'm gonna go sit down and do it on the couch now. After I just finish that other side. See what I mean? When you pull it, you shouldn't see any of it showing through. Alright, I'll meet you out when the tail's done. I think the next part we're actually doing together is, I already kind of got them started, is we're going to attach the legs. So now you should have your 2 legs. This was my first one, and this is my second one, which still has the working yarn to start the body with. We're going to leave both the stitch markers where they are for a couple rounds, but this is our first stitch of every round. So this is the only one we're going to keep after a couple rounds. So you're going to start with 13. If you're wondering what all these bumps are, they're called baubles. I decided for my circus possum it's going to be covered in baubles. I think they're so cute. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Then you're gonna chain 2, and then your next stitch to join the legs is gonna go into our stitch mark spot. And then you're going to put that stitch marker back. So I find it helpful to have it there for a couple rounds, so we know where to put our single crochets along this chain on either side. Then we're going to do 27 more single crochet, which should take us to the end of the leg. Wait, so that was 27. So now we're going to do 2 single crochet along the chain. So you know where the chain starts because this was our first single crochet. So you're going to put your first one just right after that stitch marker. You just kind of find the spot. That works. Maybe there's like a certain spot you should do, but I always just find a spot that works, and it always turns out. As I say that, though, it's gonna fight with me. Sometimes it can be a little tough. There we go. So that's 1. 2. Now your next spot is the spot over, but you should only have 15 stitches left, so if you're not sure, you can count back 15 from what you have left. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. There. So that was round 1 of the body. Now we're going to do round 2. Find it here. So now we're going to do 13 single crochet to start round 2. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And again, this is why it's good to have the stitch marker. You're going to put 2 single crochets in the front of our chain. Last round we put it in the back, now we're putting it in the front. So just put 2 single crochets before that stitch marker spot. Now we're going to do 45 single crochets. It should take us to the end, and put that first one where that stitch mark spot is, because sometimes that's a tight stitch. So put your hook in, and that's when I take the marker out for good. Don't need them no more. That's 1, 2, 3, and he should go all the way around for 45. Now we're just doing normal single crochets and increases and stuff. So I just finished that 45 stitches. But what you should have is, from your first leg, you should have that tail. I have it written in a pattern to not crochet over it, because what we're going to do is close up these 2 holes. And that's really easy to do. Just kind of grab, stitch from one side, grab it on the other, weave through it like that a few times. That's that one shut. And you're just going to go to the other side and do the same thing with this hole. There. Now you're just going to tie it off. Tie it off, and you can weave the tail end if you want, but you don't have to because it's on the inside. I'll meet ya when we do the tail. We're on round 10 of the body. It starts with 44 single crochet. Now we're going to attach the tail. So grab your tail. I usually find the seam. It should be pretty invisible. Mine's running down here, but you'll feel it. It'll be a little bulkier where it is. Put that in the middle and then facing down. So what you're going to do is you're going to crochet the tail shut while you're crocheting it onto the body. So you're going to go through one side of your tail, then the opposite side, then into the next stitch on the body. We're going to do that 9 times. That was 1. Then I like to count the rest. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And pin my piece where it should end so I can evenly know where to put my stitches across that tail. That was 1. That's 2. Again, through one side, through the other side, then through the tail. 3. Sometimes it's easy to miss stitches here. Make sure you count. That's 4. 5. 5. I'm not missing any stitches. I have to do this a couple times because I keep missing.
6, 7, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. 6, 7, 8, 9. So now it should be shut on the bottom and shut on the top. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Next, we're attaching the arms. You want the tail end, that's the side with the elbow, to be pointing to your right. We're going to attach the front 3 stitches first. So there's 8 across. We're going to do the front 3 into our first 3 stitches. And we'll attach the back half at the end of the round. That's 1. Remember, put that stitch marker back. It's 2 and 3. Next, we're going to do 9 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we're going to attach the second arm. This time the elbow's pointing to your left, so they're facing the same way. We're going to go 8 single crochet, attaching that together. This should be a little easier than the tail since the top is crocheted shut already. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. You can crochet over the tail now for the next few stitches to weave it in. We're going to do 7 across the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now you should have 5 stitches left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to attach the back end of this arm in those 5 stitches, and also crocheting over the tail as we do. One, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, both of your arms are attached. Next, I'll see you when we're knitting the belly patch. You're going to finish the head now. Now we are working on the pouch. We're going to start by casting on 7 stitches. I'm using the long tail cast on. There's a couple new knitting techniques we haven't looked at when making the pouch, so I'm just going to show you those.
7, 7. Then we're going to purl 7. Then I'm going to show you knit front and back. Which looks like KFB in your pattern. And that's increase when you're knitting. At least one way to do it. So I just purled 7. Now I'm going to show you how to knit front back. So you start like you normally would to knit. So I just knit 1, but before I throw it off my needle like you normally would, you're actually going to go and push your needle through the back, wrap your yarn around, and pull that through. So now we have 2 loops on our hook. That was a knit front back. KFB if you want to search that up. Now we're going to knit 2. I'll show you it a couple more times in this row. Now knit front back. So do a normal knit, but before you throw it off, insert your needle into the back. Wrap your yarn around and grab another stitch. Knit 2. I'll show you it one more time. Start a normal knit, but before you finish, insert your needle through the back. Until you have 2 loops on your needle. So we increased 3 times on that row. So now we should have 10 stitches on our needle. We're on round 29. I'm going to show you how to slip slip knit. It looks like SSK. To start, you're going to insert your needles like you're knitting, but instead you're just going to slip it off. And do that twice. And insert your left needle underneath both of those loops and knit them together. So we decreased a stitch there. Show you one more time. And go slip, slip, and knit. And to finish this row, we're going to knit 22. The difference between doing a slip slip knit and a knit 2 together is the stitch leans different ways. Which is why you do that on one end of the pattern and not on the other. Almost there. Now for the last 4 stitches, we're going to do 2, knit 2 together, which is inserting your needle under 2 loops and knitting them together.
so you don't do any slips when you do that. Now I'll see you when we're done the pouch, and we'll sew it on. When you're done casting off, you're going to put a stitch marker in the last stitch you casted off and the first stitch you casted off. Then you're going to transfer this loop to our crochet hook to start crocheting a border around this pouch. So continuing in the same direction, we're going to just crochet all the way around the edges until we get to this stitch mark. Then we're going to do like a fuzzy top. So just keep going down, just finding a spot to put your next stitch. I don't count because it doesn't have to be perfect. Just look for the next spot and keep them about evenly placed. I find this just makes it look nicer when you sew it to the body. When you get to the tail from when you started it, you can just crochet over the tail to weave it in. We don't need it for later. Once you go over the tail a good amount of times, you can snip that off. Okay. Gonna do one more. And then my next spot will be where that stitch marker is. Just gotta get my pattern here. So now what we're going to do is chain 5, 3, 4, 5, and then crochet into the next spot. And you're just going to repeat that until you get to your other stitch marker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Find the spot and single crochet. This is going to give the top of the pouch that we're not sewing just a little fuzzy border that I think's cute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Three, 4, 5. One, two, 3, 4, 5. Just a few more. I'll do one more. And into that stitch mark spot. And then you're just going to chain 1 and cut a really long tail. I like to kind of wrap it around 1.5 times. Now our pouch is done. I embroidered an old plushie of mine on here. So once your pouch is done, we're not going to sew this fuzzy top down, but we're going to sew the rest of it down. So what you want to do is count up 5 stitches from where we joined the legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's going to be, I think I have some pencil or something on there, where the bottom of your pouch starts. Then you're just going to kind of let it lay flat naturally. You are going to have like a bit of a poofiness in it. You don't want to pull it flat. Just let it lay how it wants. And pin it around. And then when you sew it on, start on the side with your tail, go around this way, and stop here. If you haven't done it already, once the pouch is done, you can grab your arms and legs and tie these long bits into knots. So just grab it and pull your paw through. Just like that. So that's for the wrists, the ankles is the same. And that knot just sits right at the base of that nub. We are on to making the toes. I'm going to show you how to do a cable stitch. To start by getting like 12 inches of yarn, make a slip knot. Just like that. And then you're going to use both strands. First, you're going to use the tail end. You're going to wrap it around your hook from bottom to top.
Then you're going to take your working piece of yarn, wrap it around like if you're finishing a single crochet. So that's essentially what you're going to do with it. Just like that. So again, so that was one stitch. We're going to do 5. So grab your tail end, wrap it over your hook from bottom to top, and then use your working end and finish the stitch. That's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now that you have your 5 stitches, for the longer toes, you're going to do 5, and for the shorter toes, you're only going to do 3 stitches. To finish, you're going to cut your tail, or cut your working yarn, and just pull it through. And then we'll use these tail ends to sew it onto the hands and feet. So you need 12 long ones and 8 short ones. Each hand and foot is going to have 3 longer fingers and 2 shorter ones. Starting with the longer ones, you're going to grab your hand, find the middle of it, and the top and the bottom. To find that, find your elbow, and then you can find the top and bottom. And then I like to start from the top where your magic circle is. Just go in the top of it and down through the bottom like that. So after pull that through, you're just going to tie a knot. Just like that. And then grab those 2 tails, put them both into your darning needle, and then you're going to pull them through the hand. And yank it through. And take your scissors, cut off the exit, and now that's 1 finger attached. Now we're attaching the snout. So what you want to do is, this is what it should look like when you're done. I usually start on the bottom. I just like it that way. You're going to count up. It's easy to see here, 2 rows, and pin the bottom of the snout just above those 2 rows in the middle of the face. We'll make sure it's in the middle. And then pin it the rest of the way around so it doesn't move on you while you're sewing it. I find sewing on the pieces the hardest part because it's easy for it to go crooked. I usually just do 1 on each side. And then when you sew this on, sew most of the way around, and then don't forget to stuff it before you finish. Now the snout is sewn on and stuffed, and I tied it off there. but I have not cut the tail yet because we're going to use this tail to push in the eyes on either side of the head, so they have kind of little eye sockets. If your tail isn't long enough or you cut it or snapped it, that's okay. You can just tie a new piece where we're going to be sewing in those sockets. So I ended at the bottom here. I'm just going to move it up. And again, what you actually want to do is make sure, even if you tied it off down there, that you tie it off again where we're starting our eye sockets, which is kind of lined up at the top of the snout on either side there. These are the two spots we're going to be weaving them into. So tie a knot in that first spot, because if you don't, it's going to be pulling from wherever you ended. We don't want it to do that. So now I won't do that anymore. And you're just going to weave your darning needle through those two spots just on either side of the top of the snout. And you want to pull very gently, because Bernat blanket yarn is incredibly fragile, as I'm sure you know if you use it, and breaks super easy. Once you pull on it a bit, go through not the same spot, but just a spot over, and then come out where you were before, and then pull gently. You're going to go back and forth a couple of times doing that. Until you're happy with what you have. I'm quite happy with that. It's usually indented in about an inch. That's how I like it on either side. So now I'm going to tie off for good and weave in my yarn. I usually just do a couple knots like that to tie off. And don't worry if it's a little messy in these spots, because we're going to put the eyes there later. And there you go. Now we have a snout. Now we're going to add the eyes. I have two of them ready. Mine might look a little smaller because this yellow yarn is a bit smaller than this chunky yarn. That's okay. So what you're going to do is, I like to start with the tail from when you started the magic circle, the one you're not going to sew with. I put that on my darning needle, and I just kind of like pulling it through the head to get it out of the way to start. So where you're going to put your eyes, so you know where to pull it through, is you're going to sit right in those eye sockets on either side. So it shouldn't be like on top of the snout, that's too high. It should be kind of half and half. If you see, half of it is on top, half of it is below the top. That's kind of where you want to sit it, and right pressed up against that crook. So again, I take that short tail that I don't want. I usually just pull it through the center of where that eye is going to be. And then I take some pins and I pin 2 times, one at the top and one at the bottom, so it doesn't spin when you're sewing it on. And then I take that extra yarn and snip it off. So now you're going to sew on the eyes. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I sew everything through the back loops. So like if you look when you're sewing things on, it should be a V for each stitch. And I only sew the inner part of the V. I don't grab like both loops like this. I don't do that. I just grab the inner one. Because I find that leaves kind of a nice border. I did the same when sewing on the pouch and the snout. Maybe I'll put a little note when I'm first sewing stuff on the video. Yeah, and then I just go around it, sewing it on like that. So I'll meet you once those are sewn on. I'm just going to sew on this eye. Try to do it on camera. So grab just that inner loop only. Just like that. Oh, and we have this really long piece because after we sew on the eyes, later on we're going to use the same piece. Okay, once your eyelids are done, I like moving my yarn to either like the top or the bottom of the eye, just because I find it's kind of in the way if you leave it in the corners, because we're just going to leave this to use it later. But before you do that, tie it off so that when we use it later, we can tug on it and it won't move what we've done. So that's one eye. You're going to do the same thing with the other. Again, yours probably look a little bit bigger than mine because of the yarn I'm using. Now you should have 2 eyes with your extra tails that we're just going to leave for now. And you're going to make 4 eyelids, 2 different colors, so 2 each color. Just like that. I'm doing blue for the top eyelids, which is kind of funky, but I think it's going to be cute. So when you pin these eyelids on, you want to pin them kind of on an angle. Just a slight angle upwards. I'll show you what I mean. Mine is going to look a little bit bigger than yours maybe, just because my eyes are a bit smaller because I used a different kind of yarn, but this should still work. When it comes to your extra pieces, don't sew it like that, like over top of it. You can if you want. It won't be a big deal. You can just move it back. But I just kind of move it the opposite way of which side I'm sewing down. I'll move this out of the way. And these inner corners should be really flush, like against the snout. So if you look at the eyes, they are at a super slight slant upwards. Whereas if it was straight across, they would meet up there, but slightly slanted up. Now we're going to sew it on. How I like to do it is I grab the small tails that I'm not going to be sewing with, and I kind of just weave them into the head to get them out of the way. So I'll just kind of where they're sitting, I'll just pull them into the head, give that a snip. And then they're out of the way. I'll do the same for the blue one. I'm going to try to do this a little quick so this video isn't super long. So now you're going to grab your sewing tail, either side, it doesn't matter. And when I sew this on, kind of like when I sew every piece on, I want to grab I only want to grab half of a stitch, whereas a whole stitch is 2 loops. You can see there's 1, 2. Like if you were single crocheting, you would go under 2. You're just going to sew the one closest to the face, farthest from the eye down. You're going to leave the top ones alone. And I find that makes the eyes look the best. Sorry if that was a bit confusing. Just going to go around hitting every one of those stitches. That's the top one. Just going to open up my pattern. See what order I got here. So when you're happy with that, you're going to tie it off. And then weave this in. So that's the first one. A little tip is to just try to be careful in the corners. Try to get them to meet up. And if you find that you have like an edge like this, it just isn't sitting nice, what you can do is put your darning needle through those kind of edge loops in the corner and just pull them together. And that makes it look really nice. I'm going to keep going around. So now again, we're kind of in that inner corner. So the corners, just give them a little extra care and love. I'm going to do the same thing as the other one, where I'm going to put my darning needle through both. Kind of join them together. And I'm going to tie it off. If you find your eyes are just looking a little funny, you can always kind of shape it a little bit. But just yanking on it. Okay, I'm gonna pull that in. And that's how you do the eyelids. I'm gonna do the other eyelids. And then I'm gonna show you how to keep working on the face after that, because there's a couple more steps. But that's what you should have after sewing on the eyelids. Now you have both of your eyelids sewn on. You're gonna get a long piece of yarn, the same color as your head, your darning needle. And what we're gonna do is pull the eyes a little closer together. And how much closer just depends on where you sewed them onto your possum. Because sometimes I sew them on a little bit farther, so I want to pull them in more. And in this case, the eyes are already pretty forward, so I'm only going to pull them in a tiny bit. So it just depends. The more sideways facing they are, like if they look like they're pointing this way, not forward, the more you have to pull them in. So you have your yarn. You're going to make a knot right in the corner of one of your eyes. Just like right there. And you're going to take the short tail end and weave that in. And you're going to take your long tail And what you're going to do is you're going to weave it in between here and the same spot on the other side. And you're going to pull gently because this yarn's really fragile. Just pull it in a little bit. Like I said, this guy's eyes were pretty close together already. I'm not going to do it too much. But the possum in the written pattern definitely had more of this done. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. So now I'm gonna tie it off. And now you have to decide whether you want your shinies to be in the outer corners or the inner corners. I always put mine at the top, either way, but I can show you what I mean. Because they kind of have a different look, depending on which you do, but I don't think either or are worse or better. So this is what the eyes look like when you're put the shinies in the inner corners. I find that it has a more cutesy look. And then this is what they look like when you put them in the outer corners, which kind of gives him almost a little bit of a derpy look, but is also really cute in its own way. So I love him either way. I think for mine, oh, what do I want to do? I guess I'll take a look. So this is what they would look like on the outside, or on the inside. I think I want mine on the inside. What you're going to do is, with your darning needle, you're going to skip the eyelid, but you're going to just hook it and make a knot where you want that shiny to be into the actual eye that you crocheted and sewed on. So I want mine to be right there. So now you're just going to make a knot, just like that. And then you're going to pull both of these loops in. This yarn is a little bit of a pain in the butt, but I really like the outcome, so I continue to use it. It's very soft, which is why I like it the most for plushies. Although I'm thinking about making some plushies with normal worsted weight yarn, just because it's a lot cheaper and in more colors. We shall see. This yarn is starting to get a bit expensive. And just like that, I'm just sculpting it a little bit with my crochet hook so it looks how I want it. Now I have a little shiny right there. I'm going to do the other one and then I'll come back. So now we got some eye shinies starting to look really cute. You're going to get your darning needle and one of your tail ends. We're going to make some eyelashes now. So you're going to start by moving this yarn to this outer corner. So going underneath the eye, just move it to that outer corner where these two colors connect. Just like that. Now, following the same angle of the eye, so you can use your needle, kind of follow it. You're going to make your eyelash about 2 stitches long, and then back to where you came from. Just like that. I'm going to do it twice. I don't do that when I'm using this burlap blanket yarn, but just because this yarn is a little thinner for this guy, I'm going to do that twice. So if you want thicker eyelashes, feel free to do that as many times as you want. There we go. Now we're going to tack this down. So you're going to take your needle, go underneath your eyelash, and tie it off. Go back up through that loop. And now that should not move. So that's the first part of the eyelash. Just gonna look at my pattern here. So now we're gonna move our yarn to the other side. So you're gonna go back under the eye, that other side. And now you're going to insert your needle back into that opposite corner, and you're going to exit it. You're going to kind of twist it and exit it in the middle, top of the eye, somewhere around here. So that when you pull it shut, this yarn tail is going to grab this piece and hold it. So like it doesn't pull down. Just like that. If it goes over top, you can kind of just pull your eye back out. There, and this kind of frames the eye really nicely on top. And now I like to do an extra tack down because this is still loose on top here. I just kind of grabbing that loose part and part of the eye and tying a knot. That. So now that will not move, and you just weave in this tail cut it off, and voila! You have these really cute eyes made out of yarn. I think they're one of my favorite parts of the doll. I'm going to do it to the other side, and I'll meet you at the next part. To make the nose, you're going to start with an 8 single crochet magic circle. Then we're going to do 5 single crochet into the back loops only. So you have 2 loops that make up your stitch. You're just going to go in the one faces the furthest away from you. So instead of going through both loops like that, I have 1, 2 on my hook. You're just going into the back one, so you only have 1 on your hook. So that's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then you're just going to slip stitch into the next spot. We're not going to finish the round. And you're going to cut a long enough tail to sew this onto the head. This is the nose. That's good and tight. Cut off maybe a 8-inch piece, 8 to 10. And you now have your nose. The top side, which is the 5 single crochets we made, is longer than the bottom side. So the longer side goes facing up. You're going to find the middle of your magic circle of your snout, and that's going to be where the bottom of your nose starts. So if you look on it from the side, it's going to be slightly up on the nose. It's not going to be straight on like that. A little bit up. Pin that down. And you're going to sew that on through the back loops like we've been doing everything else. I'll meet ya at the next part. My nose is sewn on. And now I'm going to sew on the cheeks. This is what it looks like. You're going to pin it with the non-fuzzy side against this bottom eyelid. I like to start it with the tail I'm going to sew with facing the outside of the face. So take the end against the snout and just pin it right in that corner between the snout and the eyelid. And you can pin it at the bottom there, kind of hold that down. And it's going to end following this eyelid. It's going to end at the bottom of this eyelash. You're not going to ever cover it. That's going to be kind of your guide there for where to sew this piece on. We're going to pin it like that. I always start by getting rid of the short tail. So I'm just going to weave that through the face. And cut it. Then I'm going to go to the end we're going to sew with. And I always sew this way, doing the inside first and then the outside. And just go around and sew this piece down. I'll meet you. I'm going to sew around here, and I'll meet you to show you how to sew around these parts. I'm at that spot now, and what I like to do is sew on like either side of the loops and in between them. So I'll go on one side, then I'll sew in between. And that way it still ties this down, but it doesn't pull down this loop. And then when you get to this next part, I just go right over top and sew that down. And then the next one will be in between. You just keep going like that. Until it's finished. And then you do the same to the other side. And I'll meet you at the next part. Now we're going to sew on these two forehead fluff pieces. So start by, we're going to have a thicker end and a thinner end. Take the thinner end with the fluffy side facing out. And you're going to pin that right underneath the fluff you just sewed on in the snout, like that. I usually put 2 pins in the bottom, and then it's going to follow up the face. Put another pin there, and one in the middle. And then here, you're kind of, it's not going to pin perfectly into place, but when you sew it on, you're going to just kind of pull it to be flush with all of these parts. So don't worry too much when you're pinning it on. Just get it close. This should go to the top of the eyebrows. There. So just depending on what kind of yarn you use and how tight your tension is, sometimes this goes a little bit higher, but usually goes somewhere around the top of the eyebrows. But they shouldn't ever meet at the middle. So sew this on, avoiding the fluffy parts. I'm going to show you what I mean here by pulling this together. So as it's naturally sitting, there's a bit of a gap. So when you get to sewing this part on, don't be afraid to grab it and really just pull it and put it where you want it to be, which is right behind that eyelid. So just grab it and pull it into place. And we'll keep going. And you want to make sure you avoid sewing over your eyelash. When you sew it, you're going to sew it like right there. So you can use that as the guide. And then sew it just behind your other fuzzies. We are making the ears. This is a finished one. We are on round 9, or I just finished round 9. So I have 5 across. So what you're going to do is count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're going to put a stitch marker there. I can't find any right now, so I'm going to use a piece of yarn. And then you're going to crochet all the way around. Keeping in the same direction. Just going to give it a little bit of a border. When you get to your starting tail, you don't want to crochet, like you don't want to weave it in and crochet over it. Just crochet around it because we're going to use it later. There's it right there. So keep going until you get to that stitch mark spot. And when you get there, go into that stitch mark spot. We're going to start our 7 single crochet. So that's 1. Crocheting over these 2 tails as we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you're going to turn your work, chain 1, single crochet, a half double crochet, 2 double crochets, a half double crochet, and a single crochet. Then you're going to finish by chaining 1, cut your yarn, and you're going to just cut these pieces. And this piece, pull it through, and you'll have to weave that in with a darning needle to hide it. You should still have your long tail from the start. We are sewing on these ears next. I'll show you once I get them clipped in here. So at the top, you want the space between these two ears from sewn end to sewn end to be 3 inches. 3 inches there. And then from here to here, when you sew it on, that's also going to be 3 inches. And they sit directly behind this fluff. So they're pretty easy to find their placement. And when you sew it on, I guess I can show you. Don't cut your tail when you're done sewing them on, because we're going to use this tail to sculpt them a little bit to give them more shape. Starting from where that tail is, you're just going to sew it as close to that fluff as you can. Just keep going down. And just sew it on the best you can. For 3 inches. Sometimes I find sewing from the back a bit easier. But I don't really have a special way of doing it. So yeah, I'll meet you when the ears are sewn on. When you're at the end of sewing on your ear, you're not going to tie off or cut this yet. So I'm going to grab my last bit that I'm going to sew on. But I'm going to exit my needle in the middle back of this ear. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. So somewhere around the middle back. It's gonna fight with me a little bit. Go. So the next step you want to do is pinch this ear sort of hamburger way from the back. So I'm pinching it about, I'm going to sew it about 1 inch in from where I'm pinching. So going straight up from the middle back, about 1 inch in from here, you're just going to move that yarn up and then weave it back down and kind of just grab the stitch that's around the same spot. So I usually do that twice, just to make sure it's really good. Tack down. Then you can tie it off and weave that in.
off. For my scissors, and there's one ear done. So now I'm gonna attach the other one the same way. The last piece you're gonna add is this fluff. So how you add it is, I like to flip it over, find the middle of your piece, and about right there. Then you pin the middle, the head right behind that forehead V fluff. You should have just sewn on. When you pin it, you want to lean it away from you. So lean it towards this fluff. Don't pin it leaning away. You don't want to do this. You want to lean it forward. Like that. Then you're going to flip it over. You can pin as you go down. I like to put pins on either side of the ears. And it should come all the way to the front, to the middle bottom. I put 2 pins there. That's one side pinned. Then we'll pin the other side. One on each side of the ear. And then pull it around the front. And it should meet the other side. A couple pins there. So now it's pinned all the way around. So when you sew on this one, you only have to sew it once. I'm not going to be sewing one side and then sewing down the other side like we have been. You're just going to tack down the base, which is the non-fluffy part. You're just going to sew this side down and that's it. So, making sure none of my fluff is stuck underneath. This is the last piece that we're sewing on, then we're just doing blush. We're almost there. So just grabbing the non-fluffy side, right close to the edge there. But now, when you keep sewing, I'm actually going to move my needle to the outside because you want this fluff to be pointing, like to be leaning towards your other fluff. So you're going to sew it from the back side only. That will help keep it that way. So you're just going to keep going all the way around, sewing from behind. This part can take a while, so I'll show you how to put on the blush once this is done. Giving them some blush. So grab your blush color, and it's really easy. I just like to, right under the eyelid, grab about a centimeter's worth of space, and I just tie about 5 knots. 3, 4, 5. And then I take the tails. I don't like doing very big blush. Take the tails and I put one in one side and one in the other. So this one's going to go on this side. Pull gently and cut the tail. Don't yank on it because you'll just pull it in. But then you could just pull it back out if you had to. And then you're going to enter the other one in the other side. Can't remember what side it was. Or it doesn't really matter what side, just whichever looks nice. I think it'll look nicer there. So I'll put mine there. Now we got a little bit of blush. And I'm going to do the same to the other side. And that's it. Then we're done. I'll